There's something almost ironic about power in relationships. You'd think the one in control would feel the most secure, the most desired. But for many women, that's not the case. Control might feel good, but only in the way a backup plan feels good. It's safety, not fulfillment. She doesn't feel as good when she has the power and control. It feels good, but it's second best. Because deep down, what truly excites her is the chase, the mystery, the sense that she's earning something real, working for a man who doesn't fold, who doesn't flinch, who doesn't need her approval to stand tall. And that's why, when you start reclaiming that energy, when you stop chasing, stop performing, stop seeking validation, she doesn't just notice. She tests, not to break you, but to believe in you again. Because any man can talk about growth. But the one who moves differently, who reacts differently, that's the one who changes how she sees you. So if you're wondering why she seems cold, why her energy is off, or why it feels like she's pulling away just when you thought things were improving, you're not crazy. You're just being tested. And how you respond from here changes everything. If this message already stirred something in you, some clarity, some strength, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Stoic Station. Now let's break it down. Why she loses interest isn't about what you did. It's how you react. Part 1. Why she loses interest isn't about what you did, it's how you react. A woman almost never loses interest in a man overnight. It doesn't vanish with one wrong word or a single misstep. No, it's more subtle than that. Her emotional shift happens quietly, in the background, in the soft spaces between conversations. And most men miss the warning signs until it's too late. You think things are going fine. You're showing up. You're consistent. You're being respectful, maybe even a little charming. You're doing what you believe a good man should do. Then one day, she sends you a simple message. What time did you wake up today? Seems harmless, right? You respond automatically, maybe even thoughtfully. 7:30, had some coffee. It was a quiet morning. But here's what you didn't catch. That wasn't curiosity. That was a calibration, a subconscious test, a pulse check on your presence, your unpredictability, your emotional independence. She's not looking for a timeline, she's checking your tone. This kind of message is what we call a low investment bait. It's not sent because she wants to know your schedule. It's sent because she wants to see how much of your emotional state depends on staying in her good graces. And if you meet that low energy with even lower energy, a predictable answer, a flat tone, a vibe that says, "I'm trying hard to stay relevant," you fail the test. Not because you're boring, not because you're doing something wrong, but because your reaction reveals a truth. You're no longer leading the emotional space between you. The shift starts here. Quietly, she begins to detach, not because you made a mistake, but because you stopped being a source of intrigue. You lost your sense of play, your unpredictability, your grounded masculinity. And worst of all, you didn't notice you lost it. Women don't need perfect answers. What they subconsciously want is your state. They want to feel that your emotional well-being isn't dependent on their texts, their tone, or their approval. They want to see if you can still hold yourself with lightness, confidence, and unshaken presence. It might seem irrational, but to her, it's deeply intuitive. When your responses become too safe, too linear, too correct, she doesn't consciously say, "I'm losing interest." Instead, she just feels it. The chemistry fades, the dynamic dulls. She stops smiling to your messages. The frequency of her texts slows down. The warmth in her voice vanishes. She goes cold, not to punish you, but because her instincts no longer feel stirred by your presence. I had a client who experienced this exact sequence. A woman he was dating used to laugh at his quirky jokes and tease him back with energy. But as he began to chase more, joke less, and aim to say the right thing rather than just being himself, she began sending short, dry texts. One day she texted, "Did you sleep well?" He replied with a detailed timeline of his sleep cycle. She didn't reply until the next evening. When he asked me what went wrong, I told him this: "You didn't fail because you told her too much. You failed because your response was rooted in trying to stay relevant, not in staying grounded." He had slipped into emotional dependency without knowing it, and that dependency showed up not in what he said, but in the way he responded, in his tone, in his need to be received warmly, in his fear of silence. Women sense this instantly. What she wanted, what she was testing for, was whether he could still keep things light, still maintain his energy, still lead the tone of the interaction, regardless of how she showed up that day. Instead of a dry report, what if he had replied with something playful, something unexpected? What if he had said, "I was having a beautiful dream where I almost texted you first, but luckily I woke up in time to keep my dignity." It's not about being clever. It's about showing that your spirit is alive, that you're still playful, that her vibe doesn't dictate yours. Because when a woman sends you a low-effort message, what she really wants to know is this: will you lower your energy to match hers, or will you lift the moment back to life? When you stop bringing your own warmth, your own unpredictability, your own emotional leadership, she starts to feel that the spark is dying. Not because something's broken, but because something subtle is missing: your edge. Attraction doesn't live in compliance. It lives in tension, in contrast, in polarity. And if your default is to respond like someone who's trying not to lose her, you become the kind of man she no longer feels compelled to hold on to. So the next time she sends a flat message or seems to check in with something emotionally neutral, don't panic. Take a breath. Reconnect to yourself. Respond, not to gain approval, but to stay in your center. Let your reply reflect who you are, not who you're trying to be for her. Keep it fun. Keep it light. Keep it free. Because it's not what you did that makes her lose interest. It's how you shrink when the energy shifts. And once you master your ability to stay grounded when she tests your presence, that's when she begins to feel something she hadn't in a long time: respect. And slowly, curiosity, and then just maybe attraction again. Part 2. The 3 most common tests women use on men. You've been growing, changing, you stopped chasing, you stopped explaining, you finally started stepping into the calm, self-led man you were meant to become. And then she tests you. At first it doesn't look like a test. It feels like confusion, like moodiness, like she's trying to pull away just when things were getting better. But these aren't accidents. They're calculated emotional nudges, her way of seeing what you're really made of when she shifts the wind against you. And the truth is, how you respond in these moments will either reinforce everything you've built or reveal that it was all just surface level. First, she'll try to scare you back into being the man you used to be. You'll notice it in the tone of her messages, the sudden dryness, the way your joke lands flat, or the way she comments with quiet accusation. You're acting different. And this is the moment. Not a moment to panic, not a moment to explain yourself, not a moment to fix things. This is where the new you either stands or crumbles. Most men fold. They hear that phrase, "You've changed," and immediately take it as criticism. They go back to people-pleasing, over-explaining, offering soft reassurances that they're still the same guy she met. But what she's really doing is this: She's trying to find out if your transformation is real or if it only exists when she's giving you good energy. The man who passes the test, he doesn't chase the approval. He doesn't retreat into performance. He leans into his truth, with calm, with playfulness, and without apology. Maybe he replies with something ridiculous like, "The best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup." And if she says, "You're weird," he smiles, because the point was never to impress her. It was to stay in his light, regardless of her clouds. Because deep down, she's not looking for perfection. She's looking for grounding, for the man who doesn't get shaken when her attention wavers, for the man who doesn't deflate just because she stops laughing. Then comes the moodiness, the emotional withdrawal. You're gaining ground, reclaiming your time, your values, your space. And in response, she tightens her grip, not with control, but with coldness. She shows up to dinner late, dressed in a hoodie, eyes fixed on her phone, barely talks, barely meets your gaze. In the past, this would have wrecked you. You would have tried harder, asked what's wrong, bought dessert to cheer her up, started talking more to fill the silence. But now, you do something different. You lean back, you observe, and when the moment is right, you look her in the eyes and say, "You seem a little off tonight. Maybe we pick this up another time." You don't raise your voice. You don't guilt trip. You don't perform. You stand. You pay for dinner. You leave. Not to punish her, but to honor yourself. Because the second you start chasing her emotional highs and lows, you lose yourself again. And a woman can't love a man who keeps abandoning himself to win her. And that silence you leave behind. That's the moment she feels the loss. Because for the first time, you didn't beg. You didn't fix. You didn't dance around her emotions. You walked with calm. And that scares her, in the best way. And finally, the bluff ultimatum. This is the sharpest blade in her drawer, the one she saves for last. She says, "Maybe we shouldn't do this anymore," or "You clearly don't care like I do." But if you listen closely, her voice is trembling. She doesn't want to end it. She wants to provoke you. She wants to watch you break character. She wants to see if she still has the power to knock you off center. And most men, good men even, fail this one. They react fast. They call her. They explain themselves. They write out essays defending their intentions because they think this is about logic. But it's never been about logic. It's about presence. It's about emotional gravity. The man who passes, he doesn't flinch. He takes a breath and says something like, "I understand. Take whatever time you need." Then he disappears. No panic, no chasing, no trying to win her back. And that silence. That's what does it. Because now she's not in control of the outcome. She's sitting with her own words, her own triggers, her own bluff. And more often than not, 2 days later, she texts, "Hey, what are you up to?" Because when she realized she couldn't shake you, that's when you became irresistible. Not because you passed her test with the perfect answer, but because you didn't need to prove anything at all. Part 3. Why being tested is a good sign. At first it feels like rejection. You're showing up with better energy, trying to stay calm, present, and emotionally available. And yet, instead of appreciation, you're met with challenges, cold responses, mixed signals, silence that feels strategic. And if you're like most men, your first thought is, "What did I do wrong?" But pause right there, because that reaction, that spiral into self-doubt, is the exact moment where most men miss the truth. You're not being tested because she's lost interest. You're being tested because she hasn't. A woman who no longer cares won't bother. She won't poke, challenge, or lean in with emotional friction. She'll simply drift, quietly, cleanly, without tension or resistance. That's how real detachment looks. But if she's testing you, if she's still stirring the water just to see what floats back to the surface, it's because something in her still hopes there's depth. That maybe this version of you isn't just temporary. That maybe this time you're not just saying you've changed, you've become someone new. It's counterintuitive. You'd think love and trust should feel like smooth seas. But women don't fall in love through ease alone. They fall when they feel a man's weight under pressure, when they challenge your emotional boundaries and you hold, not out of pride, but from principle. Imagine this. She throws out a little spark, something passive-aggressive or dismissive. The old you would have jumped to fix it. You'd chase, over-clarify, walk on eggshells. But now you breathe, you smile, you stay light. Maybe even say, "You seem a little spicy today. Everything good?" Not to dismiss her, but to show her you're not rattled. And that moment, that small response, tells her more than a paragraph ever could. It tells her your peace isn't negotiable. It tells her your confidence isn't borrowed from her approval. It tells her you're not trying to be the man she wants. You are that man already. The truth is, women don't test you to punish you. They test you because they want to believe in you again, but they need to feel something real. Not promises, not effort, not even sweet words. They want to feel that they can lean against your frame and it won't collapse. Every test is a mirror, not of her power, but of your growth. Can you hold steady when she gets inconsistent? Can you remain composed when she gets emotional? Can you hold your line without holding a grudge? That's what she's looking for. Not perfection, but presence. There's a moment that always sticks with one man I coached. He was weeks into rebuilding things with his ex. He had changed. He was calmer, sharper, more self-respecting. And then one evening, she got cold out of nowhere. Criticized how he dressed. Asked why he was talking different lately. He felt it coming, the pull to defend himself, to explain that this wasn't a game. But he didn't bite. He smiled and said, "Yeah, I'm figuring out what feels good to me lately." And he left it at that. She stayed quiet the rest of the night. But 2 days later, she texted him, "Sorry I was weird. I actually love the way you've changed." That's what happens when you pass the test. Not with words, but with energy. Being tested is a privilege. It means she still sees something in you worth uncovering, worth challenging, worth trusting, if you prove that who you've become isn't just a reaction to her, but a reflection of your truth. And here's the deeper truth most men never hear. She doesn't fall in love with the man who does more. She falls in love with the man who doesn't flinch. She falls in love with the man who leads with steadiness. She falls for the one who, when everything gets emotionally messy, stays grounded. Because that's not just attractive. That's rare. That's unforgettable. And if you can become that man, not only do the tests stop feeling personal, they start feeling like what they truly are, an invitation to rise, to lead, and to be loved for the man you are, not the mask you wear. Part 4. Don't react. Hold the frame. There will be a moment, maybe subtle, maybe sharp, when she challenges the new version of you. It could be a sarcastic comment. It could be a glance that says, "You've changed." It could be a random, seemingly innocent jab like, "You never used to wear that," or "Why are you acting so different lately?" And in that moment, every part of your nervous system will want to react, to explain, to reassure, to ask if something's wrong, to prove that your change is genuine and that your heart is still open. But here's the hard truth. If you react emotionally to that test, you lose the frame. Because what she's really testing isn't the shirt. It's your center. She's trying to feel something deeper than your words. She's watching to see if your confidence collapses the second she pulls away approval. If the strength you've claimed to build vanishes the moment she questions it. Most men fail right here, not because they're weak, but because they still tie their identity to being liked. But a man who passes, he doesn't fight, he doesn't freeze. He stays composed. He lets the jab pass through without resistance, like wind sliding off a mountain. When she mocks your new shirt, he smiles slightly. I guess I'm just evolving. No tension, no defensiveness, just calm. When she turns cold at dinner, scrolling through her phone instead of engaging, he looks around, finishes his drink, and says, "Looks like you've got a lot on your mind. I'll give you some space." And then he leaves, not as a punishment, but as a signal. I won't force connection, I won't participate in drama, and I certainly won't chase after disrespect. Because the man she respects isn't the one who convinces her to behave better. It's the man whose very presence makes disrespect feel out of place. The power isn't in coldness, it's in clarity. And that distinction matters. You're not playing hard to get. You're just no longer available to games. You're not trying to make her feel bad. You're refusing to lower yourself. This isn't about ego. It's about integrity, about knowing the difference between patience and self-betrayal. One man I worked with had been rebuilding things with a woman he deeply cared about. They were reconnecting slowly. But one night, while out with friends, she made a joke at his expense, one that used to trigger him. He didn't lash out. He didn't laugh awkwardly. He just looked at her for a second, nodded slightly, and excused himself to get some air. When she followed and asked, "What's wrong?" It was just a joke. He didn't accuse her. He didn't guilt-trip her. He simply said, "I'm just not the kind of man who enjoys being the punchline. I'll be over there if you want to talk like adults." She said nothing at the time, but later that night, in the quiet of his car, she reached over, grabbed his hand and said, "That was the most attractive thing I've ever seen you do." Why? Because for the first time, she saw he was no longer seeking her approval. He wasn't cold. He wasn't cruel. He was clear. When a man becomes emotionally clear, he stops reacting to every shift in a woman's mood. He sees the difference between someone expressing pain and someone using pain to control. He learns that not every question needs an answer, not every cold spell needs warming, and not every test needs passing. Sometimes, the most powerful response is none at all. Not because you don't care, but because you do care about yourself, your peace, your energy. Women feel safe around a man who doesn't flinch, not because he's stone, but because he's solid. She'll throw confusion at you to see if you get lost. She'll throw coldness to see if you burn yourself trying to fix it. She'll throw guilt to see if you'll shrink into the man she no longer respects. But the one thing she won't expect, what shakes her deepest, is when you don't chase clarity, when you let her sort her own emotions without absorbing them, when you create space, not out of punishment, but out of self-protection. And when that space doesn't collapse your sense of self, but reinforces it, that's when she leans in again. Not because you told her to, but because for the first time she realizes she's dealing with a man who isn't held together by her validation. And in that realization, something shifts. Respect, real attraction, emotional safety. It begins when you stop reacting and start holding the frame. Because the man who can walk away from disrespect is the man she can finally walk toward with admiration. Not because he demanded it, but because he embodied it. That's the power of emotional clarity. That's how you lead, not through control, but through composure. Part 5. Mistakes that destroy all your progress and how to avoid them. It's easy to think you're doing everything right. You're patient. You don't reach out first. You respond with calm confidence. You're rebuilding your center after a breakup or after pulling away from neediness. But then, just when it seems like you've made real progress, she throws a curveball. She gets cold again, sends something vague, maybe even says, "I don't think this is working." And here's where everything hangs in the balance, not in what she says, but in what you do next. Most men fold in this moment, not because they're weak, but because they confuse silence with distance and distance with danger. They tell themselves, "I don't want to lose her," not realizing that chasing now only confirms everything she feared, that the change wasn't real, that the old version of you is still there, just waiting to come crawling back. That's the first fatal mistake, explaining yourself. When she gets moody or tests your frame and you respond with long texts, voice messages, or emotional reasoning, you give her all the power. You validate the idea that she's still the center of your gravity, that you're still responding to her disapproval like a boy trying to earn a gold star. Real men don't explain their growth. They embody it. The second mistake is even more subtle, trying to win her back when she's being difficult. Let's say she shows up late to dinner and barely apologizes. She's cold, distracted. The whole time, you're walking on eggshells trying to salvage the moment. You joke more, you talk more, you try harder. And what does she feel? Not love. Control. Because she senses that your need for connection is greater than your self-respect. That your patience is coming from fear, not clarity. It teaches her something dangerous, that all she has to do to shift the dynamic is show a little coldness, and you'll do the rest. You'll dance harder. You'll prove yourself again. The third mistake, rewarding disrespect with more attention. When she pulls away, mocks your new boundaries, or throws you an emotional test, and you answer it with more investment, you're conditioning her to repeat the cycle. She doesn't even need to be manipulative for this to happen. It's just human nature. If pulling back gets her more power, she'll keep pulling back. That's why the most evolved men don't try to manage women's behavior. They manage their own responses. They set the emotional tone, not through force, but through consistency. But let's talk about the most painful mistake of all, the one that burns every step of progress in a single act. It's when you break your own emotional discipline. One man I coached had been doing everything right. He went no contact after the breakup. He focused on himself. He got back in shape, rebuilt his confidence, and even started talking to new people. But deep down, he still wanted her back. She reached out once, just a random meme. He responded calmly, didn't overinvest, didn't overshare. Weeks passed, more messages. He stayed grounded, until one night, she didn't respond to a playful text he sent, and at 12:47 a.m., he broke. He called, no answer. He texted, long paragraph, something like, "I just need to know what you're thinking. I thought we were doing okay again. I feel confused." By morning, she had replied, "I think we're in different places. I don't want to hurt you, but I need space." All that progress, weeks of self-control, silence, and strength, dismantled by one emotional impulse. She didn't ghost him because he reached out. She walked away because he confirmed that nothing had really changed, that his new calm wasn't real, it was restraint, not transformation. That's the hard truth. Discipline is not about the weeks you stayed silent. It's about who you are the moment the silence gets tested. Most women won't believe your growth the first time you show it. That's not cruelty, it's protection. They've seen words before, promises, emotional surges. They're not looking for fireworks. They're looking for structure. They want to know if your strength is sustainable or if it's just temporary self-control waiting to snap. So when you feel the urge to break, when you think, just one message, just one check-in. Stop. Step back. Ask yourself, is this action rooted in clarity or in fear? Am I reaching out because I'm leading or because I'm panicking? And here's what makes the difference. The man who pauses at that edge, who breathes through it, who lets the storm pass without acting, that's the man who evolves. He doesn't win her back by proving he still cares. He wins her respect by proving that he can care without crumbling. That's what draws a woman back. Not the effort you make to pull her in, but the strength you show when she pushes away. Because when she realizes that your peace is no longer up for negotiation, something shifts. Suddenly, she's the one reflecting, wondering if she judged too quickly, questioning if she mistook your distance for indifference, when it was actually self-respect. That shift doesn't come from chasing her attention. It comes from mastering your own. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be consistent. Be the man who held the line when it counted. Be the one who chose stillness over reaction. Be the presence that doesn't flinch, not to impress her, but because you finally respect yourself more than you fear losing her. And when that becomes real, that's when she starts to wonder, what kind of man walks away from drama without ever looking back? And the answer is the kind she can't forget. Summary. You can't control when or how she tests you. You can't script her doubts, her fears, or the subtle games her heart plays when it doesn't fully trust yours yet. But what you can control is who you become in the face of it. Because here's the quiet truth most men miss. You don't pass her tests by trying harder. You don't win her back by decoding every silence or chasing every shift in tone. You pass when you stop performing, when you stop proving, when you realize that your value isn't up for negotiation. The moment she sees that her moods, her games, and her silence no longer move you, that's when she begins to trust you. That's when her guard softens. Not because you forced her to love you, but because your presence gave her something stronger than charm ever could: safety. The kind of safety only a man can offer when he's no longer looking to be chosen, because he already chose himself. And in that stillness, in that unshakable calm, love stops being something to chase and starts becoming something that finds you. If this message brought you clarity, or even just a spark of strength, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Stoic Station. Your presence here, it means more than you know. Drop us a comment. Let us know what you'd love to explore next. We read every word. Stay grounded, stay steady, and remember this: the man who doesn't flinch becomes the man she can finally trust. I'll see you in the next one.